My name is Will, and I am burdened with glorious purpose, and today that purpose is to talk about Loki, Episode 1.
Come on. What did you expect?
In case you didn't know, I'm using a new camera now. Instead of my phone, I've upgraded to a Canon EOS M50, so that is going to be very exciting for the future, very useful. I'm really excited to go into videos with this. But anyway, today we are going to break down all the nitty gritty. I have watched this episode of Loki twice tonight. It came out at 2 a.m., well technically 1:50. They drop it 10 minutes early for some reason. But I've since watched it twice. It's like 4:30 in the morning. And I can't go to sleep, so I figured I haven't made a video in a long time. I kind of want to see if I can do this Loki thing weekly. So we're going to see where this leads. Anyway, let's get into everything that I noticed in the first episode, everything that I took away from it. Let me just start, kind of no spoilers, by saying it was a very strong start to the series, and something that it does that these shows have been doing very well is more deeply diving into the psychological aspects of a character, why they do certain things. And just by this first episode of Loki, I can tell that we are going to take a deep dive into his character. It's going to be great. I'm very excited. Anyway, let's get into this. So we pick up right where we left off in Endgame from the 2012 time heist, and Loki picks up that Tesseract. But what's next? Well, he lands in the Gobi Desert, and it's not too long before the TVA picks him up. And this god of mischief is really thrown for a loop. He's being taken in by some higher authority. How dare they? When he gets to the TVA, he's led through all of these trials, and he is presented a video by Miss Minutes, and she talks about a multiversal war that happened a long time ago, and that's basically why the TVA is there, to enforce this main timeline that was jumbled into one from all of these multiverses. What this looks like is a big setup for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, talking about the implications of, what can happen when the multiverse kind of unwinds. Things can go wild, and I took that as a direct tease to Multiverse of Madness. Maybe we'll see our boy Loki in there. Let's see what happens at the end of this show. But from such a strong presence of the multiverse in this first episode, that's very interesting to me. So I think that this can be a great doorway to what we're going to see in Multiverse of Madness. This is exactly what's going to happen. Some stuff's going to get messed with. The TVA refers to when somebody branches off into a different timeline and messes up the main timeline, this sacred timeline, as a Nexus Event. We learned about Nexus, well, we didn't really learn about it, but it was shown in one of the WandaVision commercials as kind of a prescription. Now that we know that this Nexus Event is when somebody branches off, this is what Loki did, is create this Nexus Event. It's very interesting, and it's a very telltale sign of what they were teasing at in WandaVision, is that, potentially Wanda is a Nexus being that can manipulate the timeline and mess it up, and I think that's really going to play into how this all unwinds in that film, like I said. Mobius, played by Owen Wilson, which, by the way, I love Owen Wilson. I'm so glad that he's in the MCU, and he's really good. He's awesome. What he does as a character is he breaks Loki down mentally. He puts him in his place. He makes Loki realize that he is the very embodiment of what he was criticizing. Loki was criticizing the TVA, saying that, it was the weak searching for power by instilling fear. That kind of really unveils Loki's true character. We'll get to that in a little bit. But if you notice in the elevator scene with Mobius and Loki, there is some familiar music being played in the background. I picked that up right away. It is none other than Franz Schubert's String Quartet number 9 in A minor. That is what was playing when Loki was up to no good in Stuttgart, Germany, taking some eyeballs out in the Avengers. The liberator of eyeballs, as Mobius mentions him as. As he's watching this playback of, the events of the Avengers, and later he sees what this variant of him had not yet lived. Mobius is like, "You're enjoying this. Look at the smile on your face." And I think that's funny because that's how all of us were reacting when we saw that. We were like, how is it, like, he's sitting there smiling while he's ripping somebody's eyeball out? You know, Loki and Mobius really just had an Avengers watch party. Coulson is mentioned, and his death is shown in this greatest hits, as Mobius refers it to. And they do very clearly say that Coulson is dead. And I just keep thinking about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and how much I want them to canonically connect it to the MCU via Disney Plus or actual films. Now is the time for that. There's plenty of Disney Plus shows, plenty of room for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. appearances. You mentioned him, okay? You know the 7 seasons that ABC made. You can't ignore, you can only ignore for so long. I'm very hopeless. As he's watching this playback of what he had not lived out yet, but what he in the main timeline had lived out, you know, he sees Frigga. Whether or not he wants to believe it, he loves her. You know, that was his breaking point. He was furious when she died, and for Mobius to point out that Loki led those guards, led the Dark Elves to Frigga, which caused her death, that was really when he started cracking. One awesome side thing that we saw during this time slideshow was that he literally was D.B. Cooper in the MCU. That was Loki. I think that's a really fun little retcon. Good job to the writers on that. That was very clever. And the fact that it was all some trick, by Thor or a bet that he lost, I thought that was really enjoyable. I love little scenes like that. But during this slideshow, Loki realizes kind of what his glorious purpose truly was. And later on, he kind of makes fun of that. We see him kind of come full circle with that attitude. This cruel trick to instill fear by the weak. He realizes that was his mentality all along. That was his game. And he reiterates exactly what he said about the TVA later on. He doesn't enjoy hurting. He broke down to Mobius after seeing literally a drawer full of Infinity Stones along with the Tesseract in there. He realizes just how meaningless these material items he was searching for in his quest for fulfillment this whole time. He realizes how meaningless these objects were. He starts throwing around the Tesseract, like it's a bouncy ball. He has this eye-opening experience in this first episode, and I think that opens up for some really good setup for the rest of the show moving forward. The objects that Mobius and some other TVA members were using on Loki to kind of bring him back when he tried to escape or move around, they call those time twisters. And the interesting thing is that in the comics, time twisters were actually 3 beings. They were created by the last director of the TVA before the heat death of the universe. Their goal was for people to survive the end and travel into the next universal cycle with knowledge of the past in order to improve the future. I think that was just kind of a fun little nod. I don't think they would introduce another 3 beings in addition to these timekeepers, which could be leading us to Kang. Let me know what you think about that below. But after seeing these stones and after breaking down to Mobius, for the first time, possibly in his whole life, he feels truly overpowered. He realizes just how weak he is to the TVA and how meaningless all of this is. He sees Odin's death as well as his own, and that just was part of the build-up to his breakdown, as well as seeing how Thor really feels about him. And at the end, Mobius kind of recruits him, calling of the hero and the hero's journey, right? Mobius says they need him to help take down himself. And what they show at the end is this hooded figure destroying people and breaching the timeline. I think that is Sophia DiMartino playing Lady Loki. So I think that's what they meant by saying that is yourself. It's a different version of himself. And in the trailers, a lot of people pointed out that it said Loki's gender was fluid on his description. And I think that one thing about that we'll see is that we're literally going to see Lady Loki at some point. I don't know how that's going to work, if they're going to be 2 different entities or if Loki had at some point merged into this Lady Loki. We know he's a trickster. We know he can deceive, so we will see. But let me know what you thought about this first episode. The God of Mischief finally gets a title, a project just for himself. Thank you for watching. Give me your theories for the rest of this show, and I'll see you in the next one.